The hum of fluorescent lights filled the waiting room, a steady artificial rhythm that matched the quiet impatience of the few people sitting scattered across plastic chairs. Chicago General Hospital at 9 a.m. was a place of monotony. White walls, antiseptic air, the occasional cough, and the distant echo of hurried footsteps. Marcus Webb barely noticed any of it. He sat near the window, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most of the patient's annual rent. His attention flickered between his phone and the sleek smartwatch on his wrist. Every second wasted here meant another delay in his schedule. A meeting postponed, a deal left hanging. To most of the world, Marcus Webb was a titan of industry, a name that opened doors and moved markets. But beneath that polish was a man made of precision and walls. He liked order, predictability, and control. Hospitals reminded him of none of those things. He had told his assistant, Clara, that he didn't need the checkup. She had booked it anyway. "You're running yourself into the ground, Marcus," she had said. "Even machines need maintenance." And now here he was, trapped in a place that smelled like bleach and hopelessness. Then it happened. A shrill cry sliced through the sterile silence. "Please, somebody help me." "Please." Every head turned. Marcus's thumbs froze mid-scroll. From the sliding glass doors burst a little girl, no more than 7, clutching a small limp boy in her arms. Her shoes slapped against the tile floor, her tangled brown hair falling into her tear-streaked face. The boy's head lolled against her shoulder, his skin ashen, his lips pale. "Please, he won't wake up. Somebody help my brother," she cried again, her voice raw with desperation. For a split second, no one moved. It was as if time had forgotten to breathe. Then chaos. Nurses rushed from behind the reception desk, shouting for a stretcher. The girl stumbled forward, trembling under the weight of the boy's tiny body. Marcus stood before he even realized what he was doing. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. The girl's knees buckled as she reached the counter. "He's sick," she gasped. "He's been sick for days. I tried to help him, but he keeps getting worse." One of the nurses took the boy from her arms and vanished through the double doors that led to the emergency ward. The girl tried to follow, but a security guard blocked her path. "No, Noah!" she screamed, her small fists pounding against his uniform. "Please let me go with him. He's my brother." Marcus felt something inside him twist, a sharp, painful pull he hadn't felt in years. That kind of cry, that kind of helplessness. It wasn't just noise, it was memory. He saw his 10-year-old self again, sitting on the floor of a shabby apartment, clutching his sister's hand as she struggled to breathe. The sound of the ambulance arriving too late. He blinked hard, forcing the image away. The little girl was sobbing now, collapsing into a chair. The security guard stood awkwardly, unsure what to do. Marcus crossed the room, his polished shoes echoing against the floor. He crouched in front of her, his expensive suit creasing for the first time in years. "Hey," he said softly. "What's your name?" The girl looked up through red-rimmed eyes. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Foster. And your brother?" "Noah." Her lower lip trembled. "He's only 3. He's all I have left." Marcus's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "Our parents, they died. In a car crash." The words came out in broken gasps. "It's just us now. I tried to take care of him, but he kept getting worse. I don't have money, but please, please don't let him die." Tears streaked down her dirty cheeks as she clutched at his sleeve. "I'll work for you. I'll clean. I'll do anything. Just don't let him die." Marcus couldn't speak for a moment. This little girl was trying to bargain with the world, offering everything she had, which was nothing. He straightened slowly, his mind already made up before logic could intervene. He turned to the nurse. "I'll cover it," he said firmly. "All of it. Whatever treatment the boy needs." The nurse blinked. "Sir, are you sure?" "Treatment could cost." "I said I'll handle it." His tone left no room for question. He pulled his wallet from his jacket and handed over a platinum card. "Money isn't an issue." The nurse hurried away. Marcus turned back to Emma. She was staring at him as if he were some kind of miracle. Then, without a word, she threw her arms around his waist and buried her face against him, sobbing. He stood stiffly at first, unaccustomed to touch, to raw emotion. Then slowly his hand found her shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice low, uncertain. "He's going to be okay." And for the first time in years, Marcus Webb, the billionaire who thought he'd built walls high enough to keep the world out, felt something real break through the cracks. The rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors echoed, faintly through the white hallways. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, clean, sharp, and suffocating. Marcus stood outside the glass door of the pediatric emergency unit, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. Beyond the glass, a flurry of nurses and doctors surrounded the tiny, motionless body on the hospital bed. Noah. The boy looked impossibly small under the tangle of wires and IV lines. His skin was so pale it almost blended with the white sheets. Every shallow rise and fall of his chest seemed like a battle. "Are you family?" a nurse had asked earlier. Marcus didn't know how to answer. The truth was he wasn't. He didn't even know these children's last names until 10 minutes ago. Yet here he was, signing forms, authorizing payments, taking responsibility as if fate had somehow assigned him the role. He told himself he was just doing what anyone with his resources should do. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered otherwise. He was doing this because he saw her. Emma sat in the corner of the hallway, hugging her knees to her chest. Her little hands trembled, her eyes red and swollen, her face streaked with tears that refused to stop. Every few minutes she looked up at the glass window, as if by sheer will she could keep her brother alive. Marcus approached quietly, unsure of what to say. Words had never failed him before, boardrooms, negotiations, interviews. He always knew what to say to get what he wanted. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was a child's world collapsing in slow motion. He knelt down beside her. "Hey," he said gently. "The doctors are doing everything they can. Your brother's in good hands." Emma didn't look up. "They said he's really sick," she whispered. "He won't wake up," her voice cracked. "What if he never wakes up?" Marcus's throat tightened. "He will," he said, though his voice faltered. "I promise you." That word, promise, hung heavy in the air. It was a word he hadn't used in years, not since he'd broken the last one he ever made. He sat beside her in silence, the sound of hospital machines, faint crying from distant rooms. The low murmur of nurses filled the void between them. Finally, Emma looked at him. "Why are you helping us?" she asked, suspicion flickering beneath her fragile tone. "You don't even know us." Marcus met her gaze, her small brown eyes full of both fear and defiance. "Because," he said slowly, "no child should ever beg for someone they love to live." He didn't say the rest. That once, long ago, he had begged too. Hours passed. Doctors came and went, murmuring medical terms Marcus couldn't quite follow. Words like anemia, bone marrow, aggressive treatment, prognosis. Every one of them sounded like a battle Noah would have to fight with no guarantee of victory. A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Mr. Webb," he turned. A woman in a white coat approached, her face grave but kind. "I'm Dr. Patricia Morrison," she said, extending her hand. "I'm the pediatric oncologist assigned to Noah's case." Marcus shook her hand firmly. "How is he?" She hesitated. "He's stable for now. But the situation is serious. The tests show signs of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's treatable, but we need to begin chemotherapy immediately." Emma's head snapped up, confusion clouding her face. What's that mean?" Dr. Morrison knelt down to Emma's level. "It means your brother's blood is sick," she said softly. "But we're going to help him get better, okay?" Emma nodded weakly, gripping Marcus's sleeve again as if he were her anchor in a storm she couldn't comprehend. The doctor straightened, turning to Marcus. "The treatments are expensive and long-term. I'll need confirmation that the financial arrangements—" "It's covered," Marcus interrupted. "Everything. Just do whatever you need to." Dr. Morrison studied him for a moment, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "You're Marcus Webb, aren't you?" He gave a curt nod. "That's right." Something about the way she looked at him made him uneasy, like she was trying to see past the polished exterior to the man underneath. "All right," she said finally. "We'll do our best." When she walked away, Emma whispered, "You're really a billionaire?" Marcus gave a faint smile. "That's what they say." Her eyes widened. "Then you can fix him, right?" The question stabbed deeper than she could ever know. He hesitated before answering, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "I'll do everything I can." The next few hours passed in a haze of movement and muted voices. Marcus didn't leave. He watched through the glass as Noah was prepped for treatment, as Emma drifted to sleep in the chair beside him, her tiny hand still gripping the edge of his sleeve. Outside, the city lights of Chicago blinked against the night sky. Somewhere in those lights, deals were being made, fortunes gained and lost. But in that hospital room, a different kind of transaction was taking place. One that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with redemption. Marcus didn't know why he stayed. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something deeper, something long buried and now clawing its way back. All he knew was this. For the first time in years, Marcus Webb wasn't thinking about profits or power, or his empire. He was thinking about a promise, and a pair of frightened eyes that refused to stop believing in him. The skyline of Chicago glowed like molten gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Webb's penthouse office. It was almost midnight, yet the city pulsed with life far below, the heartbeat of commerce and chaos, ambition and hunger. But Marcus wasn't watching the skyline. He was staring at the file on his desk. A thin manila folder lay open before him, its contents spread out like a trail of ghosts. Documents, police reports, old photographs. On top was a picture of a smiling man in a work uniform with the name tag David Foster. His arm was around a woman with kind eyes, and 2 children, Emma, missing a front tooth, and baby Noah, giggling on her lap. Marcus stared at that picture until his vision blurred. David Foster had been an engineer at Webb Technologies, his company. The very company whose name was now etched in glass 47 floors above the city. Marcus had seen thousands of employee files over the years, but this one felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't coincidence. That he hadn't just stumbled upon a tragedy. He'd stepped into the wreckage of one his empire had created. His phone buzzed, slicing through the silence. "Talk to me," Marcus said, his voice low, tired. "Boss," came the voice of his head of security. "Jalen, we found what you asked for. Full background check on David Foster." "You're gonna want to hear this." Marcus straightened, gripping the phone tighter. "Go ahead. Foster worked in your manufacturing division. 6 months before his death, he filed a series of safety violation reports, mechanical faults in the brake systems of your company's transport trucks. He was persistent. Too persistent." Marcus's jaw clenched. "What happened to the reports?" "They never left the division. Someone buried them." The silence on the line thickened. "And the accident?" Marcus asked. Jalen hesitated. "That's the thing. The truck that hit them registered to a shell company. It was created 3 weeks before the crash, dissolved 2 days after." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "You're telling me someone set it up," Jalen finished. "Yeah, and there's more. The driver? He was released after claiming brake failure. The official investigation ended a week later. No charges." Marcus leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his chest tightening. Who signed off on the report burying those violations? He already knew the name before Jalen said it. "Harold Grant, your manufacturing VP." The words hit Marcus like a hammer. Harold. The man who'd been with him since the beginning. His mentor. His right hand. "Find him," Marcus said coldly. "And don't tell anyone else." He hung up and closed his eyes. The city lights outside blurred into streaks of white and gold. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not for his reputation. Not for his company. For his soul. He'd spent a lifetime building an empire to escape the powerlessness he'd felt as a boy. The boy who had watched his sister die because his parents couldn't afford medicine. He'd promised himself he'd never be helpless again. But now, as he stared at the photo of Emma and Noah, Marcus realized that maybe the empire he'd built had made someone else helpless instead, and that someone was their father. A soft knock broke his thoughts. He turned as Clara, his assistant, entered quietly. She looked exhausted, holding a coffee and a manila envelope. "You haven't been home in 2 days," she said gently. "The hospital called. They said Noah's responding to treatment, but it's going to be a long road." Marcus took the coffee absently. "Thank you." Clara hesitated, studying him. "You've done a good thing, Marcus. Paying for that boy's treatment, it's not something I thought you were capable of anymore." Marcus gave a dry, humorless smile. "Neither did I." When she left, the silence returned, heavy, suffocating. Marcus opened the new envelope and scanned the documents. They were copies of the safety reports David Foster had filed, each one dated, signed, and stamped with the company's logo. and at the bottom of every single page was a name Marcus recognized, approved by Harold Grant. Marcus pushed back his chair and stood, pacing to the window. His reflection stared back at him. Sharp suit, expensive watch, everything polished and perfect. But for the first time, he didn't see success. He saw guilt. Below him, the city buzzed with life. Somewhere in that vast sprawl, a 7-year-old girl was sleeping in a hospital chair, clutching her brother's hand, trusting that Marcus Webb, the billionaire whose company had stolen her parents, was her savior. The irony cut deep. He turned away from the window, jaw tight, fists clenched. There was only one thing he could do now, find the truth. And when he did, he would burn down every piece of his empire that had blood on it, even if it meant burning himself with it. Marcus grabbed his coat and strode toward the elevator, his reflection warping in the mirrored doors. For once, he didn't look like the man from Forbes covers or tech conventions. He looked like a man going to war. The elevator descended floor by floor, each ding echoing like a countdown. By the time he reached the lobby, his mind was made up. He was going to confront Harold Grant. He didn't know yet that before the night was over, he'd discover something far worse, because buried beneath the forged documents and falsified reports was a truth even Marcus Webb wasn't prepared for. That the man who had killed Emma and Noah's parents hadn't acted against his company's interests. He had acted on Marcus's orders. Rain hammered against the black glass windows of Webb Technologies' tower, the kind of relentless downpour that made the city lights blur into 1,000 shimmering ghosts. Lightning flashed, illuminating the empty lobby as Marcus's car pulled up to the private entrance. His driver tried to hand him an umbrella, but Marcus waved it off. He didn't feel the rain, or maybe he didn't care. He marched into the building, water dripping from his hair onto his tailored coat, his steps echoing through the marble corridor. It was well past midnight. The world outside was asleep, but Marcus Webb was very much awake, and the storm inside him made the one outside seem almost merciful. The security guard at the elevator opened his mouth to greet him, but one look at Marcus's face silenced him. Marcus pressed the button for the 48th floor, the executive suite. Each floor that passed felt like another layer of his old life peeling away. The billionaire, the visionary, the empire builder, all hollow now, all poisoned. When the elevator doors slid open, Harold Grant was waiting. He stood behind his mahogany desk, the golden glow of the city skyline painting his face in fractured light. His silver hair was combed perfectly, his suit crisp, his posture composed, too composed. The same calm demeanor that had once earned Marcus's trust now radiated something else entirely. "Marcus," Harold said smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks. "Didn't expect to see you at this hour. Trouble sleeping?" Marcus didn't answer. He tossed the folder of documents onto the desk, papers spilling across the polished surface. Each sheet was a weapon, signed reports, buried warnings, death certificates. Recognize these? Marcus's voice was sharp but quiet, controlled the way a blade is controlled before it strikes. Harold's eyes flickered briefly toward the papers. "Safety reports," he said calmly. "From the manufacturing division. Routine compliance forms, if I'm not mistaken." Marcus stepped closer. "Don't insult my intelligence. You knew those trucks were faulty. You buried the reports David Foster filed, and then he and his wife died in a collision involving one of those same trucks." Harold sighed as though the conversation bored him. "Marcus, you know how many reports cross this desk every week?" The man was an overzealous engineer, nothing more. "Accidents happen." "Accidents don't dissolve shell corporations 2 days after the crash," Marcus snapped. "They don't vanish from police databases. And they don't involve my own company's vehicles registered under fake names." The air between them tightened. Harold studied Marcus for a long moment, then smiled faintly. A predator's smile. "So you finally looked, huh? I wondered when you'd figure it out." Marcus froze. "What did you just say?" Harold turned away, walking toward the window. His reflection glimmered against the glass framed by the storm. "You think you're the hero here, Marcus," he said softly. "But you signed off on all of it." Marcus's stomach dropped. "That's not true." "Oh, it's very true." Harold picked up one of the documents and held it up. "Your initials. Your digital signature. You approved every operational cost-cutting measure that led to the brake substitutions. You told us to keep profit margins high no matter what. The words hit him like a gunshot. Marcus stumbled back a step, shaking his head. No, yes, you, Harold interrupted, his voice rising. You were too busy chasing investors and headlines to care what corners your company was cutting. You didn't want to know, Marcus. You just wanted your numbers to climb. Lightning flashed again, reflecting the fury in Marcus's eyes. You forged my signature, he hissed. Tell me you did. Harold's expression darkened. Why would I forge what you already gave me permission to do? Silence filled the room, thick, electric, unbearable. Marcus's hands trembled. He remembered those quarterly meetings, the endless spreadsheets, the line items labeled efficiency improvements. He had approved them all. He hadn't looked closer. He hadn't wanted to. He'd thought he was streamlining operations. He'd thought he was building progress. But in truth, he'd been signing death warrants. Marcus's voice cracked. They had 2 children. Harold turned, his tone almost mocking. And now you've adopted them like some savior. How poetic. Watch your mouth, Marcus growled, stepping forward. But Harold didn't flinch. You've always been predictable, Marcus. You make your fortune on ruthlessness, then spend it trying to buy redemption. Paying for that boy's hospital bills won't erase what you did. It won't erase what we built. Marcus's composure finally shattered. He slammed his fist onto the desk, papers flying. No, he roared. What you built? You and your greed. You covered up a man's death to protect quarterly profits. Harold's voice dropped to a whisper, low and venomous. You can't wash blood off with money. You can't fix this with charity. You are no better than me. Marcus grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the window. The rain outside made the glass slick, the skyline stretching endlessly behind Harold's terrified reflection. For a moment, the 2 men stared at each other, the ruthless architect of an empire and the man who had corrupted its foundation. Then Marcus released him. Slowly, deliberately. You're done, Marcus said, breathing hard. Tomorrow morning I'm calling a board meeting. You're out, and when the investigation starts, you'll answer for every single life this company destroyed. Harold straightened his suit, his calm returning like a mask. You won't do it, he said quietly. Expose me, and you expose yourself. Every document, every signature, it all leads back to you. Marcus stared at him, trembling with rage and shame. Then let it. I'll take the fall if I have to. A slow smirk spread across Harold's face. That's noble, he said, but foolish. Because if you go down, so do those kids. The system will come for them, Marcus. The state doesn't like billionaires playing daddy, especially guilty ones. Marcus's blood ran cold. He hadn't thought of that. Emma and Noah, alone again, swallowed by the same system Emma had escaped. Harold leaned closer, voice smooth as silk. Walk away, Marcus. You've already done enough damage. Marcus's eyes hardened. You're wrong, he said, turning for the door. I've barely started. As he walked out, the storm outside reached its peak, thunder cracking like cannon fire. The elevator doors closed behind him with a metallic hiss, cutting off Harold's voice but not his words. Marcus gripped the railing inside, his reflection fractured in the mirrored walls. His empire was built on sand and blood, but before it all crumbled, he would make one final choice, one that would either damn him forever or redeem everything he'd ever destroyed. And somewhere in the distance, in a hospital room across town, little Noah Foster stirred in his sleep for the first time in days. The war for redemption had begun. The fall of the giant rain still streaked the windows when Marcus's car pulled up in front of Chicago General Hospital. The storm had quieted to a drizzle, but inside him the tempest raged on. He had just walked away from a confrontation that tore open the foundation of his empire. And now, as the city slept, his conscience refused to. He paused before stepping out of the car, staring at his reflection in the glass. The man staring back didn't look like Marcus Webb, billionaire, visionary, Forbes darling. He looked older, haunted, human. Inside the hospital, the nightlights glowed dim and sterile. Nurses moved quietly through the corridors, their faces drawn with exhaustion. The faint hum of machines filled the silence. Marcus knew the sound too well now, a lullaby for the broken. He found Emma curled up in the waiting area outside the pediatric ward. Her small body was draped in a hospital blanket, her face pressed against a stuffed rabbit someone must have given her. The innocence in that picture made something twist inside him, that deep ache only guilt can carve. He sat beside her quietly. Minutes passed before she stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, confused at first, then softening as she recognized him. "Mr. Webb," she whispered sleepily. Marcus smiled faintly. "Hey, kiddo. You should be asleep." "I was waiting for Noah to wake up," she murmured. "The doctor said he smiled today." Marcus swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "That's good news," he said. Emma nodded, then looked at him with that sharp, knowing gaze only children who've suffered learn to have. "You look sad." He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "Do I?" "You do," she said softly. "Like you lost something." Marcus looked away. "I lost everything that made me believe I was a good man," he wanted to say. But instead he said, "Maybe I did. But I think I found something too." "What?" He turned back to her. "A reason to try again." Emma tilted her head, puzzled, but before she could ask more, the doctor approached. "Mr. Webb," said Dr. Morrison, offering a tired smile. "Noah's responding better than we expected. His white blood cell count has improved. It's still early, but he's fighting." Emma's face lit up and she clasped her hands together in joy. "He's getting better." Marcus nodded, smiling through the sting of tears he refused to let fall. "He's a fighter, just like his sister." But as the joy flickered across Emma's face, Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Jalen. "You need to see this." Harold's moving fast. He called an emergency board session for tomorrow. "I'd try to pin everything on you." Marcus's heart sank. Of course, Harold Grant wasn't going to go down quietly. He was a survivor, and worse, a liar with access to every paper trail Marcus had ignored. He rose to his feet. "Emma, I have to go take care of something important, okay? But I'll be back before Noah wakes up." Emma frowned. "Promise?" Marcus crouched and met her gaze. "Promise." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded and wrapped her small arms around his neck. It was the simplest gesture, but to Marcus, it felt like absolution. As he walked away, he didn't know it would be the last time she saw him that night. By dawn, the storm had returned, and so had the vultures. The Webb Technologies boardroom gleamed with cold opulence. 12 men and women sat around the long table, their faces lit by the glow of city lights. Harold Grant stood at the head, the picture of calm authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "as of last night, Mr. Webb's actions have placed this company in jeopardy. Unauthorized charity spending, financial mismanagement, and a potential criminal inquiry. I have documents proving his negligence directly caused the Foster accident." A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. Journalists had been tipped off. Marcus entered just in time to hear the words "criminal negligence." He walked in slowly, silently. The door shut behind him with a click that sounded almost like a verdict. "Don't stop on my account," he said, his voice low, steady. Harold's smirk faltered. "Marcus, you're early." "No," Marcus said, stepping closer. "I'm right on time." He tossed a thick folder onto the table, evidence from Jalen's investigation. Internal memos, bank transfers, shell corporations tied directly to Harold's personal accounts. "This," Marcus said coldly, "is what negligence looks like." The room fell silent as Harold flipped through the pages. His face lost color. "I built this company," Marcus continued, voice rising, "but I let men like you rot it from the inside. You killed a good man and you used my name to do it." The board stared, spellbound. The air was heavy with truth. Harold tried to speak, but Marcus cut him off. "Effective immediately," Marcus said, pulling a signed document from his briefcase. "You're terminated. Security will escort you out, and you'll be facing a federal investigation." As guards entered, Harold's mask finally cracked. "You think this redeems you?" he hissed. "You think you can buy your way out of the blood on your hands?" Marcus met his glare with quiet fire. "No, I can't buy my way out of anything. But I can tear down the empire that caused it." He turned to the stunned board members. Webb Technologies is no longer a profit-driven machine. Effective today, all surplus revenue will fund medical programs for underprivileged children, starting with the Foster Webb Foundation. The room exploded into chaos. Voices shouted. Phones buzzed. Reporters swarmed. But Marcus walked out through the noise, through the flashing lights, through the downpour outside. His shoulders heavy, but his soul lighter than it had been in decades. He knew this was only the beginning. The lawsuits would come. His fortune would shrink. His reputation might never recover. But in the end, none of that mattered, because somewhere in a quiet hospital room, a little boy named Noah Foster was learning how to smile again, and a girl named Emma was waiting for the man who kept his promise. Redemption in the storm. The sky above Chicago was the color of steel, thick with thunderclouds that rolled like bruises over the skyline. The storm had returned, wild, angry, relentless. It felt like the whole city was holding its breath. Inside Chicago General Hospital, the air was no calmer. The sound of monitors and hurried footsteps filled the halls. Marcus had been standing at the window of Noah's room for nearly an hour, watching raindrops slide down the glass like tears he couldn't shed. The boy looked so small against the sea of white sheets. Too small. Too fragile to be fighting something so cruel. The chemo had drained the color from his skin, leaving only a faint, ghostly pallor. Every slow rise and fall of his chest was a reminder that life was clinging to him by the thinnest thread. Emma sat beside him, holding his tiny hand, whispering something only Noah could hear. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. Promises of stories, of birthdays, of a future she refused to believe he wouldn't see. Marcus turned away. He couldn't watch anymore. Not tonight, not after the news he'd just received. "Sir," Jalen's voice came through the phone, tense and heavy. "It's chaos out here. The press is everywhere. The SEC just announced a full audit. Half the board resigned this morning. Grant's already leaked documents saying you approved the cost cuts yourself. They're calling for your arrest." Marcus closed his eyes. The storm outside crackled. "Let them come," he said quietly. "Marcus, this could destroy you." "I deserve worse," Marcus whispered, looking back at Noah's frail body. He ended the call and slipped the phone into his coat pocket. His world, the empire he'd built to protect himself from ever feeling powerless again, was collapsing faster than he could breathe. But the only thing he cared about right now was the beeping rhythm from that machine beside Noah's bed. Then suddenly, the rhythm changed. Beep, 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 beep. The sound sliced through the air like a scream. Emma jumped, her eyes wide with terror. "Noah," she cried. The boy's tiny fingers twitched, then went still. His breathing faltered. "Help!" she screamed. "Somebody help." Marcus bolted forward as alarms erupted around them. Nurses rushed in, shouting codes and commands Marcus didn't understand. Dr. Morrison appeared almost instantly, her voice sharp but controlled. "Get the crash cart. Clear the line." Emma sobbed uncontrollably, clutching Noah's hand as the doctors worked. Marcus reached for her, pulling her back before she saw too much. She fought him at first, screaming through tears. "No, let me stay. He needs me, please." "Emma," Marcus said hoarsely, his voice cracking. "They're helping him. You need to let them." She collapsed against him, trembling, her cries muffled by his chest. Marcus held her tightly, his own heart breaking in ways he didn't think it could anymore. Behind the glass, he could see Dr. Morrison performing chest compressions, the rhythmic pressure of her hands pounding against Noah's tiny chest. Time fractured. Marcus felt himself slipping, his mind flashing back years to a dingy apartment. The sound of his sister gasping for air, the paramedics arriving too late. He could hear his mother scream, feel his own helplessness, the way guilt had become his shadow ever since. Not again. Not this time. He pressed his hand to the glass, his voice breaking into a whisper. "Fight, Noah, please, kid. You have to fight." Emma lifted her tear-streaked face. "He's not gonna die, right?" she asked desperately. "You said you'd save him." Marcus's throat locked. "You said you'd save him." The words cut like knives. He'd promised her. He had promised, and now that promise was shattering in front of him. A long, terrible moment passed, and the machine screamed, the nurses shouted. Then suddenly one word broke through it all. "Pulse." The room froze. Dr. Morrison looked up, sweat glistening on her forehead. "We've got a pulse." "He's breathing," Emma gasped. "He's okay?" Marcus exhaled shakily, his knees nearly giving out. "He's okay," he whispered, as much to himself as to her. Emma clung to him again, crying, laughing, and shaking all at once. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved him." Marcus wanted to believe that. But as he looked through the glass at the pale, unconscious child on the hospital bed, he knew the truth. He hadn't saved anyone yet, because outside these walls, his empire, the empire built on greed, pride, and silent guilt, was devouring itself. And before the night was over, the whole world would know the truth. By dawn, the storm was gone, leaving behind streets slick with rain and a city still humming with the aftershock of scandal. News outlets everywhere were flashing Marcus Webb's name across their screens. Billionaire CEO under investigation in corporate manslaughter case. Webb Technologies' empire on verge of collapse. Inside the hospital, Marcus sat alone in the chapel, the first rays of morning light filtering through the stained glass. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He hadn't slept in days. He thought he was alone until he heard a small voice behind him. "Mr. Webb?" Emma stood in the doorway, her hospital blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. He stood slowly. "Hey, how's Noah?" She smiled faintly. "The doctor says he's resting. He'll wake up soon." Marcus nodded, his relief quiet and painful. But Emma didn't move closer. She stood there, frowning slightly, her eyes searching his face. "The nurse told me something," she said softly. "She said you own the company where my daddy worked." Marcus froze. "She said you're the reason we have money for Noah's medicine." Emma's voice wavered, trembling on the edge of something deeper. Confusion, hurt, dawning realization. But she also said that truck that hit my parents came from your company." The world seemed to stop breathing. Marcus took a step forward, but Emma stepped back. Her tiny voice broke. "Is it true?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. The price of forgiveness. The wind howled across the city like a requiem. The world was awake now. Newspapers screamed headlines, cameras flashed, and the empire of Marcus Webb was burning. He stood in his penthouse office for what would be the last time. The skyline of Chicago stretched endlessly before him, but for the first time in his life he didn't feel taller than it. He felt small, human, mortal. The office was stripped bare. His awards, his Forbes covers, his trophies of power, and all gone. Only one thing remained on his desk, a photograph of Emma and Noah taken just days ago. In it, Noah was smiling weakly from his hospital bed, Emma clutching his hand. Marcus stood behind them, smiling faintly, the ghost of a man who had finally remembered what it meant to feel. He traced their faces with a trembling finger, his throat tight. Behind him, the news played softly on the TV. Breaking story. Federal investigators confirm Marcus Webb has resigned as CEO of Webb Technologies and transferred full ownership to a nonprofit trust, the Foster Webb Foundation, designed to fund pediatric cancer treatment for underprivileged children worldwide. He smiled faintly. "It's done," he whispered. The door creaked. Jalen entered, his face pale. "Boss, the feds issued a warrant. They're coming for you. If you stay, they'll make you a criminal." Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what I am." Jalen shook his head. "No, not anymore. You've done enough. You saved that kid. You gave away everything." Marcus turned toward the window again. Rain had begun to fall, faint and cold, sliding down the glass like silent tears. "Not everything," he said quietly. "Not my soul." He took a deep breath. "Jalen, make sure they're taken care of. Emma and Noah. The foundation will cover their education, their home, everything. Promise me." "I will," Jalen said firmly, his voice breaking. "But where will you go?" Marcus didn't answer. His gaze stayed on the horizon, where the storm clouds were beginning to break apart, streaks of light bleeding through. That same evening, at Chicago General, Emma sat beside her brother's bed. Noah was awake now, weak but smiling. His hand squeezed hers faintly. "Emma?" he whispered. "When can we go home?" "Soon," she said softly, brushing his hair back. "We'll have our own place. And Mr. Webb said we can plant a garden." Noah grinned sleepily. "I like him," he murmured. "He's nice." Emma smiled faintly, but her heart felt heavy. She hadn't seen Marcus since their conversation in the chapel. His silence haunted her. Just then, Dr. Morrison entered, holding a white envelope. "Emma," she said gently, "this was left at the front desk for you." "From Mr. Webb," Emma's breath caught. She tore the envelope open, her hands shaking. Inside was a letter, written in Marcus's bold, deliberate handwriting. "Emma, by the time you read this, you'll be safe, and so will Noah. You were right to ask what really happened to your parents. The truth is painful. My company was responsible. Not by accident, but by neglect. And the only person to blame is me. I spent my life building walls to protect myself from guilt and loss. But you tore them down with a single plea: please save my brother. You reminded me what it means to care, to feel, to fight for something that isn't money or power. You reminded me what my sister once made me promise, that I'd never stop trying to make the world better. I failed that promise once. I won't fail it again. You and Noah will grow up free. You'll have a home, an education, a life filled with love and possibility. And every child who walks through the doors of the Foster Webb Foundation will live because of you. Don't cry for me, Emma. I'm not running. I'm finally going home. Thank you for giving me back my heart. Marcus. The paper slipped from Emma's trembling fingers as her eyes filled with tears. No, she whispered. No, he promised. She stood abruptly. Dr. Morrison, we have to find him. But by then, it was too late. Far from the city, under the bruised evening sky, a small private plane lifted off from a secluded airstrip. Marcus sat in the cockpit alone, the letter to Emma sent hours earlier. His destination, a rural village clinic in South America, one of the new foundation's first projects, a place where hundreds of sick children waited for medicine that didn't yet exist. Lightning flashed on the horizon. The storm had followed him. He smiled bitterly to himself. Seems fitting, he muttered. As the rain pelted the windshield and the engine strained against the wind, Marcus's hands tightened on the controls. But his eyes, calm, clear, resolute, stared into the storm without fear. Hold on, kid, he whispered, his voice carried by the wind. You're gonna make it. Then a sudden deafening crack of thunder. The sky lit up and the world went dark. 2 days later, the news broke across every channel. Breaking: tech billionaire Marcus Webb dies in plane crash en route to humanitarian mission. Founder of Foster Webb Foundation leaves entire fortune to children's cancer research. Months later, spring sunlight poured through the windows of the newly opened Foster Webb Children's Center. Emma stood at the front steps in a clean white dress, holding Noah's hand. They looked up at the gleaming plaque beside the entrance. Dedicated in memory of Marcus Webb, a man who remembered what it meant to care. Emma smiled softly through her tears. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the letter, now worn from being read too many times, and whispered, "You kept your promise." Noah tugged her sleeve, pointing toward the sky. "Look, Emma." It stopped raining. She looked up. The clouds were gone. The sun shone through in golden streaks, breaking over the glass roof of the Children's Center. And for the first time since that night in the hospital, Emma felt warmth, real warmth, spread through her chest. The storm was over, and somewhere, beyond the clouds, Marcus Webb, the man who once had everything but a heart, had finally found peace.